I never thought the person I loved, the man I trusted with every heartbeat, could look at me and call me useless. Yet, that's exactly what happened the day he inherited $33 million. It started like any other morning. I was making coffee, humming quietly, thinking about nothing more than our weekend plans. The kind of ordinary day you don't suspect could be life-changing. Then he walked in, his face tense, almost strange in its unfamiliarity. I asked if something was wrong, and he just laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh. "You've been useless to me for years," he said, casually tossing my years of loyalty, love, and effort into words that cut deeper than any knife. "You've never done anything worth keeping around for. Now that I have money, I don't need you anymore." I froze. For a moment, the world tilted. My mind tried to process the sentence, tried to understand if it was a cruel joke, but the look in his eyes told me everything. This was no joke. This was final. I had spent the last decade standing by him, through bad jobs, family drama, and personal losses. I had celebrated his successes, nursed his failures, and been the anchor he claimed he couldn't live without. And yet, just like that, all of it was erased. He didn't yell. There was no dramatic scene. He simply handed me a duffel bag, a few of my personal things, and walked out. The words echoed in the empty house like a haunting refrain. Useless. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, the bag by my side, staring at the walls that had witnessed every moment of our marriage. The house felt different now, cold, alien. The memories, once warm, now felt like evidence of a life that no longer existed. It's strange the way betrayal hits you. It doesn't scream at first. It seeps in quietly, filling your chest with a weight you can't move. My chest felt heavy. My hands shook. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg him to take it all back. But instead, I sat there, numb, waiting for the reality to catch up. By the time I left the house, it was afternoon. I drove aimlessly, not caring where I went, just needing to escape the walls that had witnessed my undoing. My phone buzzed endlessly, calls from friends, family, everyone checking if I was okay. But I couldn't answer. I didn't want to explain the humiliation, the shock. How could I explain that the man I married had thrown me out like trash the moment money came into his life? That night, I found a small apartment. Bare walls, a mattress, no furniture, no comfort, just a place to breathe. And yet, as I lay down, I realized something terrifying. I had no plan, no money, no support from the man I thought would protect me. I was completely, utterly alone. And then, just as despair was about to swallow me whole, I remembered my lawyer, Sarah. She had been there through smaller fights, helped me navigate our finances, always calm, always sharp. I called her, my voice trembling. "Sarah, I don't know what to do. He kicked me out, said I'm useless." Her voice was steady, almost cold. "Did he actually mean it?" she asked. "Or is he just angry?" "No," I said. He inherited money today, $33 million, and the way he said it, Sarah, it felt final." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Good. That gives us options. Not good for him, but good for you." For the first time that day, I felt a spark. Not hope, exactly, but a realization that being called useless didn't have to define me. And if he thought money could erase me, he had another thing coming. Sarah explained the situation in a way that was both shocking and exhilarating. Because of the way his inheritance was structured and the timing of our marriage, I had rights he didn't expect. The very next day, we could make a move that would not just protect me, but send a message he wouldn't forget. As I hung up the phone, I sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the empty walls. A storm was coming, but this time, I wasn't the one being hit. This time, I was preparing. I would not let myself be erased. I would not vanish quietly. And I would not let the man who called me useless think for 1 second that he had won. Tomorrow, everything would change. I kept replaying his words in my head, useless, like a mantra. At first, it was unbearable, but slowly, it started to fuel me. Every insult, every cruel smirk he gave me as he tossed me out became a spark. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. My small apartment was quiet, too quiet. But there was no fear this time, only clarity. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. "I'm ready," I said. My voice was low, steady. "Do whatever we need to do." Sarah's reply was precise. "First, we need to confirm the inheritance details. Then, we move on the legal protections you're entitled to. He won't see it coming. He never expected you to fight back." I could almost hear the smirk in my head, the way he probably believed that wealth made him untouchable, that his words could define me, that I'd vanish quietly. He had underestimated me completely. By mid-morning, Sarah had arranged a meeting. She explained everything: the inheritance, the timing, the loopholes in his trust fund. I realized something shocking. Legally, I had more power than he did, and the more she spoke, the more I understood how I could turn the tables. "He thinks you're out of the picture," she said, almost whispering. "But with the right steps, we can secure a significant portion, and you can do it in a way that will leave him stunned and regretful." Stunned. Regretful. I allowed myself a small smile, even though I was still trembling. After everything, after the humiliation, after the betrayal, justice could be mine. And not the kind that ruins him exactly, but the kind that makes him realize he misjudged me, that he miscalculated. Later that afternoon, I drove past our old house. From a distance, I saw him, laughing, holding what I assumed was a bottle of champagne. The smugness was palpable. The kind of confidence that comes from believing the world bends to your money. I clenched my fists. That man, the one who had destroyed my sense of self in a few cold sentences, would soon learn that money isn't everything. That cruelty, when met with strategy, can backfire spectacularly. Sarah had prepared a plan for the first step. Formal legal action. The paperwork had to be precise, airtight, a strike that would leave him unable to ignore me. The moment I signed, everything changed. He couldn't just erase me anymore. He couldn't just laugh. I remember sitting in her office, pen in hand, heart pounding like a drum. Every line of that legal document felt like a reclaiming of myself. Years of being dismissed, mocked, and belittled were being transformed into a weapon of quiet power. "You're calm," Sarah said, watching me. "But I know what's going on inside you. That mix of fear, anger, and anticipation. Don't worry, it's all going to work in your favor." And it did. The moment I signed, the wheels were in motion. And I could almost imagine the look on his face when he realized I wasn't gone. When he realized he couldn't just throw me out and walk away smiling. I didn't go back to the apartment to celebrate. Instead, I drove aimlessly again. But this time, it wasn't despair that filled me. It was focus. It was power. It was the strange, heady sensation of knowing that the person who tried to erase me had no idea the storm coming for him was being quietly built. By me. By evening, Sarah updated me. "Documents are filed. Letters sent. He has 24 hours before he can respond." 24 hours. Just one day. And in that one day, I realized something terrifying. For him. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't powerless. And for the first time in years, I felt completely alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety. No. I couldn't sleep because the thought of him, the man who had thrown me out like I was nothing, about to face the reality he didn't expect, filled me with an odd sense of satisfaction. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't cry. I just waited. Waited for the moment when he would see that his arrogance, his cruelty, had created something he couldn't control. By the next morning, I received the first text from Sarah. A short message. He's shocked. We start the next phase now. I sat there, coffee in hand, staring out the window. That man, the one who thought wealth gave him power over me, was about to learn that underestimating someone you've broken is a mistake you never forget. And this was only the beginning. I could almost feel his smugness dripping through the phone when he called that morning. He didn't know yet. He had no idea what had been set in motion while he celebrated his inheritance. Hello? His voice was sharp, confident, arrogant even. Good morning, I said, calm, collected. Every ounce of fear, every tremor from the previous days had disappeared. I hope you're having a wonderful day. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear it. The flicker of confusion, the tiny crack in the armor he wore so proudly. What do you mean? He finally asked. His voice had that edge of panic that only comes when someone realizes the ground is shifting beneath their feet. I mean, I said slowly, letting every word land like a blow, that you called me useless yesterday. And I'm not. Silence. I've taken steps, I continued. Legal steps. You're not going to just erase me. You're not going to walk away smiling while I vanish from your life. I could almost hear him gulp, almost hear the disbelief creeping into his tone. What steps? Steps that will make sure you remember how wrong you were about me, I said. Calm, measured, powerful. Steps that remind you that loyalty, love, and trust aren't things you get to throw away when money comes along. The line went quiet again. Then a laugh, a nervous, forced laugh. You wouldn't dare, I smiled. Try me. By the afternoon, the legal notices had reached him. I didn't need to see his reaction in person. The calls, the texts, the messages, all dripping with panic and disbelief, told me everything. The man who had laughed at me, the man who thought wealth made him untouchable, was unraveling. And I watched it all from my small apartment, quietly, observing him realize that the person he thought was useless had just become untouchable in ways he couldn't even imagine. He called again, voice trembling. This isn't fair. You can't do this. Fair? I interrupted, my voice calm, steady. You kicked me out. You called me useless. You thought I'd vanish. You think the law, or anyone, should bend to your arrogance. No. You created this. You opened this door yourself. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. I could hear it, the anger, the panic, the disbelief all wrapped in one desperate sound. You think you can take from me? He spat. I don't want to take from you, I said. I want you to understand that words have power, that betrayal has consequences, that the person you broke isn't broken. By the evening, the media whispers had started. Not full-blown headlines yet, but the right people knew. The right people he thought he could charm or manipulate were starting to look at him differently. And he had no idea it all started with me. I spent the night thinking about the past, about every cruel word, every laugh at my expense, every moment I let myself be small for the sake of his ego. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not because he had money or power, not because he had been humiliated, but because I had reclaimed myself. Every step of the plan, every carefully calculated move was a statement. I was here, I existed, and I would not be dismissed. And when he finally realized the full scope of what I had done, when the arrogance cracked, the facade fell, I knew I had achieved more than revenge. I had achieved justice. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hits silently. And sometimes it's the calm, collected person you underestimated, finally standing tall while the one who betrayed you realizes the cost of their actions. That night, I didn't celebrate. I just sat quietly, reflecting. On the betrayal, yes. On the humiliation, yes. But also, on the strength I had discovered inside myself. For years, I thought I needed him to validate me, to protect me, to give my life meaning. But in the end, it wasn't him. It was me. And the man who thought money gave him power over me, he would never forget the lesson. Because the person he discarded had just built a storm he couldn't escape. The morning after the legal notices hit, I could feel the tension in the air, even from miles away. Sarah called me early, her voice a mix of excitement and calm precision. "He's in shock," she said. "I've never seen him this rattled before. The arrogance, it's completely gone. He has no idea how to respond." I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. I let the words sink in. This was the moment I had imagined countless times during those long nights of despair. The moment when he would realize that throwing me out, calling me useless, believing I could be erased, had been the biggest mistake of his life. By noon, the calls and emails poured in. Business partners, family members, friends, people who once admired his wealth and charm, were now questioning his character, his judgment, even his reliability. The carefully constructed image of the man I once loved was crumbling, piece by piece, all because of the truth I had quietly unleashed. And then, the call I had been waiting for, the confrontation. How did you... His voice broke mid-sentence. Panic, disbelief, humiliation all tangled together. "I didn't have to do much," I said, calm and controlled. "You did it all yourself. You underestimated me. You threw me away. You thought money could erase me. But I'm still here, stronger, smarter, unbroken." There was a long pause. I could almost hear him swallowing his pride, trying to find a foothold. This isn't fair," he whispered, but it had no force behind it. "Not anymore." "Fair?" I repeated. "You think the world owes you fairness after what you did to me? You called me useless. You threw me out of the house I helped make a home, and you thought you could walk away smiling? No, not this time." I could hear him trembling, a man once so confident now reduced to words he couldn't even finish. And that, I realized, was more powerful than any financial gain, more satisfying than any victory. You're just lucky," he stammered. I let out a small laugh. "Luck? No, strategy, strength, and perhaps a little justice." That's when I saw it, the first real crack in his facade. The arrogance, the charm, the ego he had built around money and control. It all began to crumble, and I had been the hand guiding the collapse, not out of hatred, but out of necessity, out of survival, out of reclaiming the life he thought he could erase. By evening, the storm I had quietly built reached its peak. His friends began avoiding him. His colleagues were cautious. Even family members started questioning the man who had once seemed invincible. The reality of his actions, the cruelty, the betrayal, the arrogance, was now reflected back at him in ways he had never imagined. And I, sitting in my small apartment, felt a strange sense of calm. Not triumph, not gloating, just peace. I had survived. I had reclaimed myself. And I had shown the man who tried to destroy me that power is not measured in money or control. It is measured in resilience, in courage, and in the ability to rise when the world tells you you're finished. I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need him to grovel. I didn't need to see him suffer. The satisfaction wasn't in revenge. It was in watching the truth unfold, in seeing justice quietly do its work. And as I looked out the window that night, I realized something powerful. Losing him, being discarded, being called useless, it had been the catalyst I needed. The moment that broke me also revealed who I really was. I was no longer someone who could be thrown away. I was no longer someone who needed validation from the very person who tried to erase me. I was free. And in that freedom, I found something stronger than any inheritance, stronger than any wealth, stronger than his betrayal. Myself. The man who thought he had the power to destroy me had underestimated one thing: me. And in the end, that was his greatest mistake. The weeks that followed were quiet but powerful. Not quiet like nothing happened. Quiet like calm after a hurricane. The man who once called me useless was no longer the center of my life. Not because I had taken anything from him, but because I had reclaimed everything I needed for myself. I found a new apartment. Smaller, simpler, but mine. Every wall, every corner, every quiet moment felt like freedom. I didn't have his wealth, but I had my dignity, my choices, and most importantly, my self-respect. That, I realized, was worth far more than money. Friends I had drifted away from during my marriage began to return. Not out of pity, but because they saw the strength I had built from nothing. And I welcomed them with open arms, knowing the connections that mattered weren't the ones built on convenience or wealth. They were built on loyalty, trust, and respect. Sarah continued to guide me through the legal aftermath. The man who had tried to erase me now understood the cost of underestimating someone he believed was powerless. But the real victory wasn't a T in the court documents or settlements. It was in the knowledge that I had stood tall when I could have crumbled, that I had been discarded and still rose. I thought about that morning, the day he tossed me out and called me useless. I remembered the despair, the numbness, the disbelief. And I realized something important. That day didn't break me. It revealed me. I was stronger than I knew, smarter than I gave myself credit for, and resilient in ways I had never imagined. That man may have had money, power, and arrogance, but he did not have what I now possessed: clarity, control, and freedom. And freedom is not something anyone can take away. I often think about him now, not with anger, not with hatred, not even with the desire for revenge. I think about him with a quiet sense of justice fulfilled. The lessons were loud enough without me having to shout. The universe has a way of correcting arrogance, of balancing betrayal. And I was just the witness to its work. Sometimes I catch myself smiling when I remember the day I realized I wasn't useless. The day I understood that being discarded by someone who never truly valued you isn't the end. It can be the beginning of everything. I've started to rebuild my life in ways I never thought possible. Simple joys, meaningful relationships, moments of peace and happiness that no money could buy. I've learned to trust myself again, to value my worth, to honor the person I am, not the reflection of someone else's expectations. And if I could give anyone one piece of advice from my story, it would be this: never let someone else define your value. Never let cruelty, betrayal, or arrogance convince you that you are less than you are. Because sometimes, the very thing that seems like the worst day of your life is the day that sets you free. The man who thought money could erase me? He learned the hard way that power isn't always in wealth, that arrogance has consequences, and that betrayal creates lessons that sting, yet also teach. As for me, I learned that losing someone who never truly valued you can be the beginning of finding yourself. That being discarded is sometimes the universe's way of pushing you toward your own strength, that the silence of someone's betrayal can be louder than any revenge you could ever seek. And in the quiet, I found myself. I am not useless. I am not broken. I am alive, stronger than ever. And that is worth more than $33 million. Even now, when I think back to that day, the day he threw me out calling me useless, I can feel the sting. But I also feel the fire it lit inside me. Pain, when channeled, can be more powerful than any fortune. It can push you to rise when you thought you had nothing left. I spent years believing that my worth was tied to him, his approval, his love, his validation. I built my life around someone who didn't know how to see me, who didn't know how to respect me, and who thought money could overwrite years of shared history. Losing him forced me to see something crucial. My life, my worth, my identity never depended on him. For weeks, I reflected on every memory we shared. The happy ones, the bitter ones, the moments that seemed insignificant at the time, but now had weight. Each memory became a lesson in trust, in resilience, in knowing when to hold on and when to walk away. And I walked. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I walked out of the shadow he had cast over my life. I walked into a space where I was no longer defined by someone else's arrogance or cruelty. Sarah reminded me often that the legal battle wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming agency. "You're not just protecting yourself," she said. "You're showing him that underestimating you was the gravest mistake of his life." And she was right. But more importantly, I realized that I didn't need to focus on him anymore. The real victory was in discovering myself, the strength I had ignored, the courage I had buried under years of compromise, the resilience I had underestimated. I began to rebuild in every way. Simple routines became sacred rituals. Morning coffee no longer symbolized ordinary days. It symbolized survival. Evening walks no longer represented passing time. They represented freedom. Every small act reminded me that life could be beautiful without someone who had tried to erase me. I also started to reconnect with people I had lost along the way. Friends who had drifted away, family members who had distanced themselves. Suddenly, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about surrounding myself with those who valued me for me, not for what I brought to someone else's life. And in these moments, I understood a truth I wish I had known all along. Betrayal doesn't define you. Arrogance doesn't diminish you. Pain doesn't destroy you. What defines you is how you respond, how you rise, how you reclaim your life after someone tries to erase you. I thought about him sometimes. The man who thought $33 million could buy his freedom from accountability. The man who believed calling me useless would end my story. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't want revenge in the cruel sense. I only wanted the truth to reach him. That words have consequences. That actions have consequences. That underestimating someone is often the most expensive mistake one can make. And the truth did reach him. Not in shouting, not in chaos, not in spectacle. It reached him quietly, in letters, in legal decisions, in subtle but undeniable shifts in his world. And in that quiet, I found my loudest satisfaction. I was standing, unbroken, thriving, while he was forced to reckon with his choices. It's strange how life works. The very moment I thought I had nothing left, I discovered everything I needed. Strength I didn't know I had. Courage I thought I had lost. Clarity I had been searching for in all the wrong places. And the world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. No dramatic moment of vindictive revenge had to happen. Life simply shifted. Balance returned, and I was no longer defined by someone else's betrayal. I was defined by my response, my choices, my ability to rise. I learned something that day, something I carry with me. The most powerful form of revenge isn't cruelty or spite. It's living fully, reclaiming yourself, and building a life so strong, so complete, that those who doubted you can only watch in stunned silence. The man who once believed he could erase me? He was left with a quiet truth. The person he discarded was never useless. She was simply waiting for the right moment to rise. And rise I did. By the time the dust settled, I understood something profound. Life doesn't always hand you closure. Sometimes it gives you a choice. Walk broken or rise unshaken. I chose to rise. The man who had thrown me out, calling me useless, had been humbled in ways I could never have imagined. But my victory wasn't in watching him falter. It was in reclaiming myself, in proving to myself that my value was never tied to someone else's approval. That lesson, the one I learned through betrayal, pain, and quiet determination is the one that lasts forever. I rebuilt my life step by step. My apartment became a sanctuary, my work a source of pride, my relationships authentic and nourishing. I surrounded myself with people who saw my worth, people who celebrated it rather than doubted it. And slowly, I found joy again, not the kind dependent on someone else's presence or approval, but the kind that grows from self-respect and inner strength. Sometimes I still think about him, not with anger, not with resentment, not even with longing, just reflection. And I realize now that his betrayal, painful as it was, forced me to see the truth about myself, the strength I had ignored, the courage I had buried, the potential I had overlooked. I also realized something else. Revenge doesn't have to be loud, cruel, or public. It can be quiet, methodical, and just. True justice isn't about hurting someone. It's about restoring balance, reclaiming dignity, and showing the world, and yourself, that you are unshakable. That man? He learned the cost of arrogance and betrayal. But I didn't need to revel in his downfall. I only needed to reclaim my life, step by step, day by day. And that, I realized, was the most powerful form of justice of all. There's a strange freedom in losing someone who never truly valued you. Because losing them forces you to find yourself, forces you to rebuild stronger, forces you to understand that the love, respect, and validation you crave begins within, not outside. I no longer dwell on the $33 million. I no longer think about the house, the possessions, the symbols of a life that was never mine to begin with. What matters now is the life I've built, the boundaries I've set, the strength I carry, the peace I've earned. And sometimes in quiet moments I catch myself smiling. Smiling at the memory of the man who thought he could erase me, and at the knowledge that he underestimated one thing, me. Because I am not useless. I am not broken. I am alive. I am whole. I am strong. And that, more than any money or legal victory, is the truth. If there's a moral in my story, it's this. Betrayal may shatter trust, heartbreak may cut deep, and life may feel unbearably unfair. But what betrayal cannot do, what heartbreak cannot erase, is the strength, resilience, and value that exists within you. Sometimes losing someone is the greatest gift you could ever receive. Sometimes the person who betrays you unknowingly teaches you the most important lesson. Your worth has always been yours. And in reclaiming it, you become unstoppable. So, to anyone watching this story and feeling discarded, betrayed, or undervalued, know this. You are not defined by those who fail to see your worth. You are defined by how you rise after being thrown down. And when you rise, the world can't ignore you. I am living proof of that truth. After the storm, life slowed down, but my mind didn't stop. I spent countless nights reflecting, not on him, not on the betrayal, but on myself. On the strength I had discovered when everything I thought mattered was stripped away. On the courage I had ignored until it was all I had left. I realized something that day. Trust is sacred. And it is not something to be given freely, nor something to be destroyed lightly. I had trusted him with my heart, my life, my very sense of self, and he had shattered it. But that shattering, painful as it was, became the foundation for rebuilding trust, not in him, but in myself. I started listening to my instincts again. I started setting boundaries I had never dared to enforce before. I began to understand that self-respect is a form of armor, a shield that protects not only your heart, but your entire life from people who fail to value it. And as I rebuilt my life, step by careful step, I noticed a profound shift. The energy around me changed. People who truly cared and respected me gravitated closer, while those who once took me for granted faded away. It was as if the universe itself was teaching me that the strongest connections are those rooted in respect, trust, and authenticity. not convenience or fear of losing someone. I also learned about forgiveness, not as an act for him, but as an act for me. I didn't need to forget what happened. I didn't need to excuse it. But I needed to release the grip of anger and humiliation on my life. Forgiveness became the key to peace, and peace became the key to freedom. Looking back, I realized that betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation are not punishments. They are teachers. They expose the cracks in our lives, forcing us to confront ourselves, our worth, and our choices. And when we do, when we confront ourselves honestly, we rise stronger, smarter, and wiser than we ever imagined. I remember sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the city lights glow softly in the distance. The silence was comforting. No chaos, no anger, just me, breathing, reflecting, and realizing how far I had come. The man who once held the power over my life had none of it anymore. But that power, my strength, my confidence, my freedom, was mine forever. And that is the ultimate truth I want anyone listening to understand. True power is not inherited. It is not earned through money, control, or manipulation. True power is discovered in the quiet moments when you reclaim your life after someone tries to erase you. It is built from resilience, courage, and an unshakable belief in your own worth. I am living proof of that. I also realized that life has a strange way of balancing itself. The man who once thought he could define me, destroy me, erase me, was now forced to watch silently as I thrived. And the beauty of it wasn't in gloating. It was in the quiet dignity of standing tall, unbroken, empowered, and free. I discovered that happiness, fulfillment, and self-worth are not dependent on anyone else. They are cultivated within, nurtured by your choices, and strengthened by your resilience. And once you understand that, betrayal no longer has the power to define you. It becomes a chapter, not the whole story. And so, I chose to embrace life fully, to cherish every small victory, to honor my journey, to trust myself first, always, and to never let anyone else diminish my value again. Because I am not useless, I am not broken, I am alive, and I am unstoppable. Months have passed since that day, the day he threw me out, called me useless, and thought money could erase me. And in that time, I've learned more about life, trust, and myself than I ever could have imagined. The man who once held the power over me is no longer relevant in my life, not because I needed to humiliate him, but because I finally realized that his opinions, his wealth, his approval, never defined me. They never had. And the strength I found in losing him is a strength that will never leave me. I've rebuilt everything on my terms. My home, my work, my relationships. They all reflect who I truly am, not what someone else wants me to be. And in that process, I discovered a truth that is simple but profound. Freedom is the most powerful inheritance anyone can receive. It doesn't come from money, titles, or possessions. It comes from claiming your own life, your own choices, and your own worth, no matter what anyone else says. I also discovered the quiet power of reflection. Betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation don't define you. They reveal you. They show you the strength you've buried, the courage you've ignored, and the resilience you've underestimated. And when you face that truth, you rise stronger than ever. I don't dwell on anger or revenge anymore. Those feelings served their purpose. They fueled my fight. They clarified my focus. But they are no longer necessary. What remains is peace, clarity, and a deep understanding of my own power. The man who tried to erase me, he will always remember the day he underestimated me. Not because I shouted it from rooftops, but because my life, my strength, and my dignity speak louder than any words or money ever could. I now understand that true justice doesn't roar. It doesn't seek revenge. It moves quietly, steadily, and leaves a lasting impact not through harm, but through strength. Through rising when you're meant to fall. Through reclaiming your life with courage and clarity. And in that, I found liberation, a freedom that no one can take away, a confidence that no one can diminish, a peace that no betrayal, no cruelty, no arrogance can ever break. So, to anyone watching this story, feeling small, betrayed, or discarded, know this: your worth is not defined by those who fail to see it. Your power is not measured by someone else's wealth, approval, or control. The ultimate strength lies in rising, in reclaiming, in building a life that no one can take away from you. I am living proof of that. I am not useless. I am not broken. I am alive, unshaken, unstoppable. I have survived the storm of betrayal, reclaimed my life, and discovered the true meaning of strength, freedom, and self-worth. And that is the ultimate truth. Because sometimes, losing someone who never truly valued you isn't the end. It's the beginning of everything. It's the moment you rise. It's the moment you reclaim yourself. It's the moment you become unstoppable. And I did.